What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Processing Blue podcast. I'm Alex Zietlow, Carolina Panthers beat writer for the Charlotte Observer, and I know what you're thinking. This isn't the wonderful introductory voice that somehow equally balances earnestness and sarcasm, the voice of Mike Kay. And that's because Mike is on the injury report today with an illness and will be sitting out this podcast. We need to get him ready for Denver this week. He's got to travel to the Mile High City. But joining me today is Andy Dalton. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That'd be cool, though. It's another veteran, our columnist, Scott Fowler. And Scott, pleasure to be with you. First question, is it an honor of a lifetime to be back on the Processing Blue podcast?
Oh, for sure. I've been banished from the podcast for some very bad things I said last year, I believe, and so this is my return. I'm sure it's going to be a return to glory. I forgot what I said last year, but this is my first appearance in 2024, so I'm sure the Panthers will probably turn it around as well because of me being here.
Absolutely. I mean, you've been hopping on the Dan Patrick Show. People know you from charlotteobserver.com. We're gonna get into a lot of things that will be uncomfortable to talk about if you're a Panthers fan. So, Scott, do we anticipate any positivity coming from your end, or should we just get into it and see what happens?
It's a nice time of year, beautiful outside. I love October, my favorite month in the Carolinas. So there might be a glimmer of positivity, but not a lot. No, Alex, not a lot. You saw it firsthand last week in Washington. I wasn't there, only watching it on TV, but you had a firsthand look at that game. And wow,
Yeah,
what a meltdown.
Yeah, it was brutal. Let's just get into this Washington game real quick. Like Scott said, I was there. I was out on the field to be there to take in the atmosphere. It was a beautiful day. I also caught the Charlotte FC game the night before, which was really cool. And I got to see Charlotte on decision day win take a match 3-0, lock in that fifth spot in the playoffs. And that's the best finish they've ever had in the MLS regular season. I get to ride a bike around the National Mall on Sunday morning because the game was a 4 p.m. start, and that was really fun. I got to hang out with Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln and FDR and all those dudes. I get to the stadium. It's gorgeous. I see Deontay Johnson talking with Dave Canales pregame because it was still it wasn't truly a question going into the game if Deontay would play, but he did show up on the injury report with a whole bunch of injuries, among them ankle, ribs, hamstring. But everything felt good. It was a beautiful day. And then the game started. And then this fragile Panthers offense had one thing go wrong on this very fragile Panthers team. And that one bad thing was Andy Dalton, instead of dirting the ball on a screen pass to Miles Sanders, throws it in the hands of Dante Fowler, a linebacker for the Commanders. And he takes it 67 yards for a pick six, his first pick six of his career. And then the game kind of gets out of hand from there. I know it's kind of crazy to think about, but the game it wasn't over from there because the margin on the scoreboard wasn't that bad. But Scott, watching from your perspective and with how fragile this team has proven to be over the past couple weeks, was there almost a moment of, okay, this is it. This is how it's going to go today?
Yeah, I think, and first of all, very happy to see Fowler's do well. So at least the right guy caught that ball and returned it for a touchdown.
Scott, I almost said your cousin, Dante Fowler.
Yeah, no relation, but I wish he were, but he's not. You're right. Fragile is a good word for him. Like I was watching, the Monday night game a little bit last night, and a good team. Panthers got down 10-0 really fast. And so did Baltimore last night. Got down 10-0 really quickly against Tampa Bay, and then just, proved they're a great team and just smashed through the Buccaneers for the rest of it. Scored something like 34 points in a row or something. That's what a decent or a good or a great team does. The Panthers can't do any of that stuff right now. So you're right. As soon as the house of cards, it's like more Jenga blocks, I guess. As soon as you pull one, they just all crumple right now. And that shouldn't have done it. a good team getting down 7-0, that should not have mattered that much, but it did. And the difference was really the offense. I thought the defenses looked horrible for most of the year, but the offense to only score 7, I mean, that's rough. That is really rough, and that's what I think made it feel worse, is that they weren't even scoring a little bit like they had the week before to make it seem a little more palatable to watch.
Absolutely. That's kind of what I keep going back to is it tolerable to watch this team? Is it tolerable to be a fan of this team this year? Yes, you can look at the total yards difference. Washington out yarded the Panthers 421 yards to 180. Yes, the passing game was so much better on the Washington side, which is something going into the game we probably expected, considering the fact that Jaden Daniels is having a rookie season of a lifetime right now. But guess what? Jaden played 1 series. Marcus Mariota was the quarterback who carved up this defense. The rush defense for the Panthers was awful. 214 yards rushing for the Commanders. In some ways, it looked like the Brian Robinson show out there, who is a guy that I don't think the casual fantasy football guy had starting this week, and he definitely should have. Just everywhere you look, the red zone defense, the penalties. I mean, the Commanders were penalized more than the Panthers for 8 penalties for 55 yards, and you wouldn't think that. It felt like the Panthers were making mistakes everywhere too. Obviously lost turnover battle, lost the explosive battle. Everything was bad. After the game, Mike wrote his grades as he always does, and there were a lot of F's on there. Naturally, I think he gave Chuba Hubbard in the run game a D or something like that, and that was largely because he didn't sustain any drives. I ran down what Dave Canales said immediately post game, and then I also wrote whatever players said in the locker room, which was essentially that this is the same story every week. The Panthers are reliving this same terrible nightmare from previous years, yes, but also from this year too. I mean, the defense was asked, hey, how difficult is it to play without all your starters back? And it's like J.C. Horn was like, I mean, yeah, it's tough, but this is the same thing that we have to deal with every week. Yeah, we don't have 6 of our 7 front guys, with Shaq Thompson out, with Josie Jewell out, with Javion Clowney out, with DJ Wanham still on the injured reserve list, with Derek Brown out for the year, with Ashawn Robinson out. The Panthers just had Shai Tuttle as a planned starter in this game. But no one cares. It's the same story every week, as J.C. Horn said. Same story every week for Deontay Johnson, who only had 1 catch for 17 yards, and he responded in the same way, saying, guys, I'm not the quarterback. Guys, I'm not the play caller. I can't control my involvement in the offense, which you can. Because if you're going to get the credit for how involved you are one week, you can't avoid the blame the next week. But so that's kind of, those are the 2 things I wrote about from the place. You wrote about something that I'm glad you did. It addressed the elephant in the room. Now that Andy Dalton has cooled off, and he was ice cold this past week, you tackled the question, should Bryce Young come back and be the starting quarterback for these Panthers? And I was wondering if you could kind of break down your argument. You ultimately said that he should this week against Denver, and I was hoping you could come back and break down your argument for that.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know that that's a long-term solution. What I just want to see him for one more week. If one more week he throws 5 picks and they gain 90 yards total, I think it's fine to sit him back down. But I would like to see him, because the season, let's face it, is more or less lost for the anyway. So I think at some point, and it's not going to be this week, as Dave Canales very clearly said Monday that it's not going to be this week. The Andy Dalton's our starter. He just keeps going with that. We're going to make the team better with Andy. But if they haven't given totally up on Bryce, you got to use him some more and at least see if he's learned anything over these past 5 weeks. I don't think there's any harm in that. I don't think there's any harm in giving him another start Doesn't have to be against Denver, although I think it should be. But if not, then it needs to be somewhere down the road where you give him another couple of starts. And the reason I said maybe right now is if you're going to trade him, and his value is plummeted right now, so you could not trade him for much. I mean, a fifth, sixth, seventh round pick, something like that. But if you're going to trade him, his value would have a chance of going up if he played a good game, if people saw that. So that's, maybe a long shot, but at least something. And the thing is, the clock is running out on Andy Dalton. I mean, his contract's running out. He's going to be 37 later this month, I think, if he hasn't already turned 37. So you got to figure this quarterback thing out. And really, Andy Dalton probably gives you a better chance of winning games. And after 2 games, I thought it was fine to switch it up. But now I think it's time to switch it up again because the Panthers are a lost cause. And the reason is their defense is so bad that outside of Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, you probably can't win games with that defense right now. So, you've got some room for experimentation to me on offense. And that's why I thought Bryce Young should start this week. Again, my suggestions, as usual, are usually ignored, and this one has been as well. But I do think we're going to see him again, Alex. I do think we will, because I don't think Andy Dalton, just odds are in the NFL, he won't stay completely healthy for the next 10 games. So I think at some point we will get one more look at Bryce Young, whether we want to or not.
So you said a lot of fascinating things there. Just one quick thing about the trade piece. You said that his stock is super down. Whenever first round, or not even first round quarterbacks get traded, whenever quarterbacks that have been drafted by a team get traded, and essentially the team is like, okay, we can't do anything more with this guy. The trade value is never good. It never. Just kind of combing through a couple recent examples. The Commanders traded away Sam Howell last year. They traded away Sam Howell, a 2024 4th round pick, and a 2024 6th rounder, and they got back a 3rd round pick and a 5th round pick. So they gave up a lot of assets to only get 2 draft picks there. The Steelers traded away Kenny Pickett last year. They traded away Kenny Pickett and a 4th round pick for a 2024 3rd round pick and 2 2025 7th round picks. That's not great return either. You got the Patriots trading away Mac Jones. The Jaguars got Mac Jones for literally a 6th round pick. And I think that is probably, not to say that Bryce has gotten the chances that Mac Jones has had yet in Carolina, but that feels sort of like similar right now. I don't know your opinion on that. The Bears trade away Justin Fields. I mean, the Trey Lance situation over in 49ers. This does not feel the Panthers aren't going to get a haul no matter what for Bryce Young.
No,
so
they won't.
So
they probably won't trade him. Yeah, they're probably not going to trade him in the next few weeks, I don't think.
So, and I lay all that to say this, and we asked this to Dave yesterday. Are you sensitive to the questions of what are you going to do with Bryce, because the Panthers mortgaged so much of their future on him, and now he's sitting on the bench, and his draft and everything about him is kind of going down in the league's eyes. You say that he could get another shot at some point with this Panthers team. What needs to be the situation for him to get a shot? Is the only opportunity an Andy Dalton injury? Is that what you think?
Well, it's the most likely opportunity. I don't think it's the only one. I think, coaches are prone to change their minds. And if Andy Dalton throws in another few clunkers, then maybe, you redo it. Or, they're 1-6 now. If they're 1-10, 1-11, they may decide to do it again. But right now, Dave Canales seems quite certain that he's going to continue to start Andy Dalton. So I don't think we're going to see this anytime too soon. You're right that the trade part of things, it's almost better to be on the other side of that. For instance, when the Panthers traded for Baker Mayfield, they only gave up a 5th round pick. So it is a buyer's market And that may be the way the Panthers ultimately find their quarterback for 2025. I don't know. But if they don't end up drafting one, which I would argue you probably should draft one and trade for one, because quarterback, if you don't have that, it's a quarterback league. If you don't have that, it almost doesn't matter what you have. And now the Panthers not only don't have that, but they don't have, hardly anything else, which is why we're where we are. But yeah, I think we'll see him again. Will he be any better? I have my doubts, but I'd like to see it again. I'd like to see if it's going to be any better. And at least, it's this mop-up duty they're giving him. I probably would have used him at least a series earlier in this last game. He's getting one series and these 30-point blowout losses. I'd like to see him one more time just to make sure that all of us saw what we thought we saw.
And one final point on this quarterback thing, and then we'll move on. We ask him, so we ask him a bevy of questions about this quarterback question, because that's the thing that's most on Panthers fans' minds right now. And he ultimately intimates this is about Andy. This is about getting this offense ready under Andy Dalton's leadership. And where the dissonance for me is, there's this idea, it's unfair to Andy to constantly tug him in all these different ways about, okay, are you the starter? Are you not? Blah, blah, blah. But this is literally what Andy Dalton signed up to do when he came to Carolina. It is explicit that he came to Carolina to mentor the Panthers' next franchise quarterback. And so I know that Dave Canales didn't draft Bryce Young. I know that Dan Morgan was in the building, but he didn't have the final say. I know that Brant Tillis didn't have a final say when talking about who the quarterbacks drafted for the future. But I do think it's interesting that there's this talk of we need to stick with Andy in order to make this offense go the furthest it can. And and there's some sort of semblance of it's unfair. Because this is literally what Andy signed up for. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that, but that's something that strikes me.
Well, I just think what you make a good point there is that these guys aren't nearly as invested in Bryce Young as the previous regime was. I mean, to bench him after 2 games, to have seen enough, and those 2 games were awful. I mean, they were outscored 73-13. They were just awful. And so you could kind of understand it, but then not to retry it at some point. Yeah, you don't need to be fair to Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton understood exactly what he was getting into. I'm sure he probably thought he wasn't going to start a game all year, and now he's started 5, and he'll start a 6th against Denver. So Andy Dalton's a pro. He's going to do whatever you say. I think really what this is all about, Alex, is they're just trying not to be embarrassing, and they think, Andy Dalton has the best chance of getting them enough points to scrape out a couple more wins. So I think this is all about winning right now at the quarterback position. At other positions, I don't think that's necessarily what they're doing. But at quarterback right now, they're going with this grizzled veteran who is just not going to, long term is not going to be your quarterback. I would say move on. Let's figure out who the new quarterback's going to be as quickly as possible. But they're more of the mindset of, well, we're only, 3 games behind in the NFC South or whatever it is. We could still make a run. It's still possible. I'm saying there's still a chance. So I think that's where they really are right now.
I mean, Scott, you heard it before. Ron Rivera, the one season where the Panthers made the playoffs without a winning record, things were looking really dire, and Ron kept saying to y'all, hey, we still have a shot. And it ultimately ended up working. So who knows? Maybe this.
Yeah, but that was the year that everybody in the South was terrible. I mean, this year, Tampa Bay's
Bucks are okay.
The other Tampa Bay and Atlanta are both pretty good. New Orleans is bad, but yeah, that's right. They were 3-8-1 that year, and then they won 4 games at the end and won the division at 7-8-1, which I don't think we'll ever see that again. But that's how they did it.
Yeah. Okay.
Of course, they had a quarterback too back then.
Yes, of course. And while we're digging into the past. Let's take our shovels and try to truly find rock bottom, Scott. Before I ask you this question, let me lay this out. The Panthers just notched their 8th worst loss in terms of point margin this past week. They lost by 33, which ties for 8th worst in franchise history. And then earlier this year, they notched their 4th worst loss in terms of point margin with a 37-point loss to the Saints in week 1. So, and the Panthers are on pace to shatter the record for most points given up in NFL history. The current record holder for most points given up in a season are the 1981 Colts, who gave up 533 points through 16 games. The 1966 Giants gave up more points per game, but they had fewer games. Now the Panthers have a historically bad defense with 17 games to work with. And on top of that, they have all these offensive issues. They already got their win, so they won't be the first 0-17 team. But I wanted to ask you this. As someone who has seen all 30 seasons of the Panthers, or are like embarking on seeing their 30th season with the Panthers, is this the worst team in franchise history at this point, do you think?
Not quite, I would say, but they definitely have a chance to surpass all that and dig the best, the deepest hole they ever have. To me, I've seen them all, and there's 4 teams that would be in contention. This one, last year's, so that's another one. 2010, when they had Jimmy Clausen as the quarterback, and they ended up at 2-14. And then 2001, where they were actually 1-15. So they were, they won the first game that year and lost 15 straight. But that team actually was pretty decent, had some decent talent on it. Steve Smith was on that team. He was just misused. And they scored a good bit. They just couldn't stop anybody. So you throw that team out, it's not them. So the other 3 possibilities are 2010 and then the last 2 years. Right now, I would go with 2010. And the reason is, while they did win the second game, Clausen was, to me, the worst quarterback the Panthers have ever had for a long term. I mean, he started a bunch of games, not just a few. Mm-hmm. And they would, those games to get to 7 was to get to 3 or 7 or 10. That was like climbing Mount Everest. They were horrible offensively, worse than this team, a good bit worse than this team. And to me, that was the one time that I really driving to Panthers games would cringe, knowing what was coming. And I don't just emotionally don't quite feel that yet here. Still kind of interested in some of the players on this team and how they play and stuff. But I'm not saying, if they keep sustaining 30-point losses, sure, they're in the running. I'll say that, whether for good or bad, they're in the running. Right now, my gold medal for worst Panthers team ever would go to 2010. They then drafted Cam Newton the next year. So that was the upside of that. If you're going to be bad, be really, really bad. Get the number 1 pick legitimately. Don't trade for it with half your team assets like they did for Bryce. Mm-hmm. And then make a great pick. And then all of a sudden you're good again, or at least, you're decent. And that's what happened the last time. That's what they need to happen this time.
Yeah. You do such a great job of making these terrible assertions feel hopeful. You use words like they still have a chance to be the worst team.
That's sarcastic. Yeah.
Right. And if you're gonna be bad, be really bad, guys.
Yeah. Well, no, that's true. Yeah. You got to take the long view. I know it's painful Sunday to Sunday, but the long view, better to be 1-16 than 5-12. Really.
I mean,
in terms of the draft and where's this next quarterback going to come from? The easiest way is to get him in the draft and to do the same thing you did with Bryce Young, but to pick C.J. Stroud, pick the C.J. Stroud equivalent this time. That's the easiest way to make this whole thing turn around.
Yeah, it's so easy. Just finding a generational
quarterback. So easy. They just haven't been able to do it for 7 years, but so easy.
Yeah, that's fine. It sounds like you think that I should do a mock draft for top quarterbacks already.
Yeah,
like in the month of
I'd do
October.
that like this Sunday. Absolutely. Right.
Okay, real quick. Let's just knock out a quick Broncos preview, so we could move on and because as you said, this game is no longer this season is less about seasonal success now and more about figuring out, okay, what are we going to do at the quarterback situation? How are we going to make this defense better next year? How are we going to get healthy? I did. There are a couple positive things coming in to this Denver game if you want to take that bent with it. Jonathan Brooks was embarking on his second week of practice. The second round running back is looked good last week in practice, according to Dave Canales. And once you add another playmaker in there, that's another interesting kind of fold to all this because the running backs haven't been a problem. Actually, the running backs have been a really huge positive this year. Chuba Hubbard's running like his like he needs to pay rent next month, and guess what? He's deserving of that next contract. It seems like Miles Sanders provided, I think, the only play of 25 plus yards against the Commanders with this like end around run, and he's really valuable. So figuring out what they're going to do with that running back situation is going to be a challenge, but it's also an exciting challenge. Dane Jackson returned last week. He got his feet under him. He'll have another week to show off. Adam Thielen is eligible to come back to the team this week is eligible to open that 21-day window if the team so chooses to do so. He has the ability to be taken off of the injured reserve list this week. So there are some positive this week. And Jadeveon Clowney said he was feeling better. So maybe you get some healthy guys this week before the Broncos game. But let's look at this Broncos team real quick. They've won 4 of their last 5. Their own rookie quarterback, Bo Nix, is looking sort of competent, which is, and most people might consider that a pejorative. No, I'm saying that as a positive. Having a rookie quarterback be sort of competent is like really good in today's NFL. Javonte Williams, the running back out of North Carolina, he's looking at it like a king out of the backfield this past week. 14 carries for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also added 20-plus yards receiving. This Broncos team looks pretty good, and they're confident at the absolutely wrong time for the Panthers. Scott, is there any path to victory for the Panthers this week, or should we just go to Munich?
Well, every NFL game there is a path to victory, but it's very unlikely. They would probably have to have. I think what would have to happen is Bo Nix would have to have a poor game, and they would need to have 2 or 3 kind of cheap turnovers where Denver turns the ball over and gives them some chances. Broncos defense is pretty good too. I mean, they just absolutely eviscerated New Orleans, and we know what New Orleans did to the Panthers. And I watched some of that. Nix runs the ball better than I thought he did. He ran for like 75 yards in that game. So he's another guy like Jaden Daniels who runs, which is problematic, to guard the quarterback running the ball. So it doesn't look good, but I think what would have to happen again is that they just have to have something, weird would have to happen. Return a punt for a touchdown, get a pick six, something that I think the problem is the Broncos are just going to try to run, because right now the Panthers have, Broncos ran for 200 plus last game. Panthers gave up 200 plus, and that's kind of the MO that's happening with them right now. So they're not going to have to throw the ball very much if they just run Javonte Williams and, for 6 yards a carry. So it's going to, it would have to be strange. And, Dalton would have to have a big game. I don't see it happening, but every week there's something in the NFL that makes you go, huh? So maybe the Panthers are due for one of those sometime this year again. I wouldn't bet a lot on it though.
Yes. Things that make you go, featuring Scott Fowler is
that's a standard feature. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, dude, I agree. I mean, I am a bit concerned, Scott, that you're catching up with me in our predictor prognostications between you, me, and Mike. I believe now 6-1 on the year, and I believe you're what, 4-2? Something like that.
4-3, probably. It would have to add up to 7, Alex.
Oh yeah. Okay. maybe 4-3. Yeah,
I don't think
that's
I'm very close. I did win that contest last year, but the way I won it was I just picked against the Panthers for like 17 straight weeks or something. This year, unfortunately, I didn't follow my winning formula, and so I'm down a couple of games. But yes, congratulations to you. I'm sure there's a big prize for you at the end of the year for that one, which you can hold on to by just picking the Panthers to lose every week. I think you'll probably be starting.
Scott, you made me giggle. Okay. Well, I think we did a good job of surmising the Panthers' place in this point. I think we're ready to wrap up. You good, Scott?
I'm good.
Thanks, as always, for listening to our pontifications on all things Panthers with normally Mike K, but this week Scott Fowler and myself and our wonderful producer, Zach. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to charlotteobserver.com for all your Panthers needs. Stay humble, stay creative, and keep processing.